My name is Louise. I'm 32 years old, living in Boston, where I work as a trauma therapist. But my journey here began in the darkest way possible. 7 years ago, on the night of my 25th birthday, my life changed forever. My stepfather, Frank, a man who had terrorized our family for over a decade, broke into my apartment in a drunken rage. He dislocated my shoulder, and as I collapsed onto the floor, my mother just stood there, frozen, watching. Before I share how that night shaped everything that followed, let me know where you're tuning in from, and please subscribe if you want to hear more stories about resilience and survival. My childhood wasn't always filled with fear. Until I was 8, life felt safe, even warm. That was when my biological father passed away from aggressive lung cancer. It was just my mom, Diane, and me after that, learning to navigate life together. She worked 2 jobs, but still managed to give me movie nights, weekend baking sessions, and unwavering support at every school event. Those years, though difficult, built a bond between us that felt unshakable. That bond began to fracture when I was 12. Mom met Frank at the bank, where she had just started working as a teller. He was the branch manager. Confident, polished, and generous. The first night she brought him home, he brought her flowers and handed me a book on astronomy, knowing from her that I loved the stars. He was charming, patient, and even included me in their outings. 6 months later, he proposed, and by the time I turned 13, they were married. At first, it felt like an upgrade to our lives. We moved into his spacious colonial home in a wealthy neighborhood. I got my own room with a brand new computer and bookshelves stacked with novels. But the cracks showed quickly. Frank took over the finances, persuaded Mom to close her accounts, and slowly pushed her friends away under the guise of being protective. Soon, her laughter, her colorful clothes, even her bright red lipstick, faded into silence and beige. I saw Frank's temper for the first time when I was 14. Mom had bought a sundress without his permission. It wasn't expensive, but Frank hurled a dinner plate against the wall, spaghetti sauce dripping down like blood. He didn't hit her that night, but it was only a matter of time. By high school, I had perfected the art of avoidance. Clubs, libraries, weekends at friends' houses. Anything to stay away from home. The day I walked in on Mom covering a bruise with makeup, she swore she had walked into a door. I didn't believe her. That was when I knew for sure Frank's abuse had escalated. I begged her to leave, but she insisted it was a one-time thing. I was 16, helpless, and furious. My way out was education. I studied relentlessly, applied for scholarships, and landed a place at Boston University. Mom whispered, "I'm proud of you," the night before I left, but when I asked her to come with me, she refused. "This is my life now, Louise," she said. "But it doesn't have to be yours." A college was freedom. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I made friends, studied psychology, and began unraveling the patterns of control and abuse that had defined my family. With encouragement from mentors and my boyfriend at the time, I started therapy. Slowly, I accepted what I couldn't change. I couldn't rescue Mom if she wasn't ready. But I could build a healthier future for myself. I graduated with honors, started graduate school, and eventually found work at a community mental health center. Life was moving forward. But Mom, she was still trapped. Calls were brief, visits rare, and whenever I pushed too hard, she retreated. Then, just months before my 25th birthday, she called me in tears. Frank had found a brochure I'd mailed her for a women's center. He smashed her phone, accused her of betrayal, and left her shaken. Whispering from a neighbor's landline, she admitted she was scared, but still said she couldn't leave. The house, my job. What would people think? Mom whispered, her voice shaking. "None of that matters if you're not safe," I told her firmly. "Please, Mom." I'm scared of what he might do. A long silence stretched between us before she finally murmured, "Maybe you're right. Let me think about it. I'll call you tomorrow, when he's at work." When I hung up, Eric, who had been listening to my side of the conversation, looked at me with concern. "Do you think she's in immediate danger? Should we call the police for a welfare check?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Frank's careful. He's never done anything that would get him arrested. If the police show up without proof, it might just make things worse for her." We stayed up late weighing options, refining a safety plan in case Mom decided to leave. I barely slept, clinging to hope for her call the next day. When it finally came, my heart sank at the first words out of her mouth. "Everything's fine now," she said, her tone unnaturally cheerful. "Frank and I had a good talk. He was just worried I was being influenced by negative people. We're going to start marriage counseling." Every word felt rehearsed. I could practically picture Frank standing right beside her, monitoring every syllable. "Mom, are you sure?" I pressed gently. "You know you can tell me if." "Absolutely sure." She cut me off. "Oh, Frank wants to say hello." Before I could object, his voice slid through the line, smooth, controlled, and chilling. "Louise. So good to hear you're keeping in touch with your mother. I hope you're not filling her head with nonsense about our marriage." "I just want her to be safe and happy," I replied carefully. "She is both of those things with me," he said. His tone was pleasant, but the threat beneath it was unmistakable. "Perhaps you should focus on your own life instead of interfering in ours. Family is sacred, Louise. Remember that." The call ended abruptly. Panicked, I contacted the local police, explaining everything. The officer was sympathetic but firm, without evidence of a crime or direct testimony from my mother. Their hands were tied. "If she calls and says she's in danger, we'll respond immediately," he assured me. "But we can't force help on someone who doesn't ask for it." A frustration clawed at me. Over the next few weeks, I tried calling Mom constantly, but she never answered. The rare texts I did get were robotic, updates about her garden or local events, messages I knew Frank had dictated. As my 25th birthday drew closer, the knot in my stomach grew unbearable. Something was wrong. I felt it in my bones. The day itself fell on a Friday in late October. The air was crisp, leaves crunching underfoot as I walked home from the subway after work. Under other circumstances, I might have celebrated with friends or gone out with Eric. But he had a late client emergency and promised to make it up to me the next night. My coworkers had surprised me with cupcakes at lunch, and friends had sent texts and social media wishes throughout the day. Still, none of it quieted the unease. That evening, I tried Mom's number again. No answer. I left a cheerful voicemail, careful not to mention Frank, just telling her I loved her. Then, I settled into my apartment, my sanctuary on the third floor of a brownstone. The space was small but mine thrifted furniture, plants, framed psychology articles on the walls. Safe. I ordered Thai takeout, poured a glass of wine, and curled up with a novel. Around 9 p.m., Eric called to wish me happy birthday again, promising that tomorrow's celebration would be worth the wait. By 11, I was in pajamas, drifting toward sleep. The pounding on my door jolted me awake. Heart racing, I glanced at my phone. 12:17 a.m. The pounding grew louder, rattling the frame. A voice followed, slurred but terrifyingly familiar. "Open this door, Louise." "Frank." I crept to the peephole. There he was, face flushed with rage, or alcohol, or both. Behind him, half hidden, was my mother. Her expression was sheer terror. "What are you doing here?" I shouted through the door, my voice shaking as I fumbled a text to Eric with one hand. "We came to wish you happy birthday," Frank boomed, his false cheer curdling my blood. "Open up, Louise. Don't be rude to your parents. Go away. I snapped, louder this time. Leave, or I'm calling the police. Something in him broke. His pleasant mask dropped. You ungrateful little. He roared, slamming his body against the door. Wood splintered around the lock. 2 more kicks, and the door burst open. He stumbled into my apartment, eyes blazing with murderous rage. I backed away, phone clutched in my hand. I'm calling 911, I shouted, already dialing. But Frank lunged. He smacked the phone out of my grip, yanked me forward by the hair, and drove his fist into my cheek. Pain exploded across my face. Frank, stop! Mom's trembling voice came from the doorway. Please, you're hurting her. He ignored her. His massive frame overpowered me, slamming me against the wall. My shoulder twisted behind me, until it gave with a sickening pop. White, hot pain swallowed my vision. This is what happens when you try to destroy a family. Frank hissed in my ear, his breath heavy with whiskey. I screamed, begging my mother to help me. But she stood frozen, paralyzed by fear. Another blow to my ribs, then my temple. I crumpled to the floor, my phone just inches away. With everything I had left, I reached for it, pressing the SOS shortcut I'd programmed. 3 taps. Location sent. Frank's boot crashed into my ribs again, forcing the air from my lungs. Darkness closed in. The last thing I saw was my mother's tear-streaked face before the sound of sirens grew faint, and the world went black. When I opened my eyes again, it was to the steady beep of a heart monitor. My shoulder burned, my ribs ached, and my whole body screamed with pain. A warm hand held mine. I turned my head. Eric sat beside me, his face lined with exhaustion and relief. Eric, I rasped. His eyes snapped open, filling with tears. Louise. Thank God. You're safe now. A moments later, a nurse and doctor entered, checking vitals, explaining injuries. Your right shoulder was dislocated. We reduced it while you were unconscious. The doctor said gently. 2 fractured ribs on my right side, facial contusions, and a mild concussion. You were lucky the police arrived when they did. The doctor said gently. Do you remember what happened? The memories rushed back in horrifying clarity. Frank breaking down my door, the first punch, my mother watching in shock, the sickening pop of my shoulder. I nodded slowly, wincing as pain rippled through me. Frank, I whispered. My stepfather. He attacked me. My mother was there too. Are they? Your stepfather is in custody. Eric cut in, his voice taut with controlled anger. The police arrested him at the scene. Your mother's in the waiting room. She's been here all night, but she's afraid to come in. A moments later, a woman with kind eyes and a small notebook entered. I'm Officer Rivera. She introduced herself. I'll need your statement while the events are still fresh. With Eric's hand steadying mine, I relived the nightmare aloud. The pounding on my door at midnight. Frank's rage. My mother frozen in place. The final moment before sirens drowned everything into black. We have your stepfather on charges of breaking and entering, assault, and battery. Rivera confirmed. Your emergency call captured parts of the attack, and the forced entry is clear. Your injuries and the medical report strengthen the case. The question now. Do you want to press charges? Yes. I said instantly, my voice stronger than I expected. I want him prosecuted to the fullest extent possible. Rivera nodded approvingly. Good. Too often, victims are afraid to move forward. We'll prepare the paperwork once you're stable. We'll also discuss a restraining order. After she left, Eric filled in the gaps. He'd received my broken text and, when I didn't answer his frantic callbacks, called the police himself. By the time he arrived, the door was splintered, blood streaked the living room wall, and Frank was handcuffed in the back of a patrol car. My mother, hysterical, had confirmed everything through sobs. She's a mess, Eric said softly. crying, shutting down. But her statement matches yours. I think she's in shock. A knock interrupted us. My mother stood in the doorway, looking smaller than I remembered. Pale, hollow-eyed, shoulders hunched as if the weight of years pressed down on her. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Eric looked to me. I nodded. He squeezed my hand before stepping out. "I'll get coffee." "Take your time." Mom crossed the room slowly, hesitating until she reached my bedside. "Up close," she broke, covering her mouth as fresh tears streamed down her face at the sight of my bruises. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice fractured. "Louise! I'm so sorry." Part of me wanted to turn away, to reject her apology as too little, too late. But then I saw it. The haunted look in her eyes, the tremor in her hands. The way she flinched at every sound. Classic signs of trauma. I had been trained to recognize them in others, but somehow never fully saw them in my own mother. "Sit down, Mom," I said quietly, nodding toward the chair Eric had vacated. She perched on the edge, twisting her hands. "I never thought he'd hurt you," she whispered. "He threatened to, so many times. But I believed if I stayed with him, if I did everything he wanted, he'd leave you alone." "How long has he been hurting you?" I asked, though deep down I already knew. Her eyes dropped. "Since about a year after we married. It started small, pushing, grabbing. Then the slaps. Always followed by apologies. Promises it would never happen again. By the time it got worse, I was trapped. He controlled the money, isolated me from friends, convinced me I was worthless. And then," she inhaled sharply, "he said, if I ever left, he'd kill you. That he'd find you, no matter where you went. I believed him, Louise. I thought staying was protecting you. But in the end, I failed anyway." Her words twisted like a knife. The same logic I'd studied in countless victims. But hearing it from my own mother broke me open. "What made him come after me now?" I asked. She swallowed hard. "Your birthday card. The note you wrote saying your door was always open for me. He found it. He was drinking, angrier by the hour. He kept saying you were trying to steal me away, destroy our marriage. He forced me into the car. Said he was going to teach you a lesson." Her composure shattered. She sobbed into her hands. "When he hit you, I froze. I should have stopped him. I've never hated myself more than in that moment." A nurse entered to check my pain levels, giving us both a moment to collect ourselves. When she left, Mom's eyes were still rimmed in red, but her voice carried a new resolve. "The police asked if I'll testify. I told them yes. I'm done being afraid. It took seeing him hurt you to understand silence doesn't protect anyone." Throughout the week-long trial, I endured Frank's cold, unblinking stare from across the courtroom. Each day, I refused to look away, refusing to be intimidated any longer. Eric sat beside me constantly, his quiet presence anchoring me through every testimony. My colleagues from the mental health center came to show support, as did Professor Levine, who had driven up from Boston University. On the final day, during closing arguments, I did something unexpected. I asked permission to address the court directly. After a brief conference with the attorneys, the judge allowed it. Standing before the jury, I spoke not just for myself but for my mother. And for every survivor silenced by fear. What happened to me that night was not an isolated act of rage. I told them. It was the culmination of years of control and abuse. My stepfather didn't just attack me physically. He spent years breaking my mother down, convincing her that his cruelty was love, his control was protection. Domestic violence thrives in silence and shame. Today, by speaking the truth, my mother and I refused to be silenced any longer. The courtroom was still when I sat down. 2 hours later, the jury returned. As the four women rose, the air seemed to hold its breath. On the charge of breaking and entering, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of assault and battery with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, we find the defendant guilty. Relief hit me like a wave, so strong I nearly collapsed. My mother gripped my hand, tears streaming down her face. Frank's mask of composure finally cracked, his face twisting with rage as the bailiffs closed in. 2 weeks later, at sentencing, the judge's words cut through years of silence. "Mr. Sullivan, you used your position of trust to terrorize your family. This court sentences you to 15 years in state prison." As they led Frank away, a weight I had carried since childhood began to lift. For the first time since I was 12, I could breathe without fear. 2 years later, on a bright spring morning, I stood before a small audience in the community room of the Boston Women's Shelter. My hair, once hacked short after the attack, now fell in soft waves past my shoulders. The scars had faded, though my shoulders still ached on cold days, a quiet reminder of what had been. "My name is Louise Moore," I began, "and today I want to talk about the journey from victim to survivor to thriver." The women before me knew pieces of my story already. Some had been in support groups I led. Others had received counseling at the Breakthrough Center, the organization I had founded after completing my master's in trauma psychology. With guidance from Professor Levine and a grant from a victims advocacy foundation, the center had become a lifeline for survivors rebuilding their lives. 2 years ago, I lay in a hospital bed, broken, physically and emotionally. Today I stand here, not because the pain disappeared, but because I learned to carry it differently. Healing isn't linear. It's messy. Some days you move forward, other days you fall back. But you keep going. My mother sat in the front row, pride glowing in her smile. After the trial, she had lived with me for 6 months, throwing herself into therapy, rediscovering who she was beneath decades of control. Now she had her own apartment near mine, a part-time job at a bookstore, and a new sense of independence. She wore bright red lipstick again, tended a small garden, and had joined a book club, small acts of reclamation that became the foundation of her new life. Our relationship, I told the audience, was rebuilt through difficult conversations, countless tears, and eventually forgiveness. Not for Frank, but for ourselves, and for each other. Forgiveness for the times we didn't act, or couldn't act, under impossible circumstances. I paused, letting my words settle. The hardest lesson I've learned is that you cannot save someone who isn't ready. But you can leave a light on in the darkness, so when they are ready, they know where to go. Eric sat beside my mother, his hand resting gently over hers. The diamond on my finger caught the light as I gestured. Our engagement was recent, a step taken only after long conversations about trust, intimacy, and the ways trauma reshapes both. He had never rushed me, only waited patiently as I learned to breathe freely again. The road hadn't been easy. Months of physical therapy had restored most function to my shoulder, though pain lingered. Nightmares haunted me for years, replaying the attack until therapy and time dulled their grip. Healing required more than medicine. I turned to yoga, meditation, and painting, my canvases now hanging in my office as reminders of survival through creation. The Breakthrough Center grew beyond my earliest vision. We offered therapy, support groups, legal aid, housing assistance, and career workshops. Survivors returned as peer mentors, transforming their pain into strength. One, a woman named Nancy, had found the courage to leave her husband after hearing me speak. Today, she was part of our team, her accounting skills helping others rebuild financial independence. The greatest myth about abuse, I told the women, is that it only happens to certain kinds of people. The truth is, it can happen to anyone. Survivors don't need judgment. They need compassion and practical support. As I concluded, I looked out at the faces before me. Some bore visible scars, others carried wounds invisible, but no less real. Each woman was both tragedy and triumph, proof that healing was possible. My stepfather took years of peace, safety, and health from us, I said softly. But he failed to take what mattered most, our ability to heal, to love, to rebuild. That resilience lives in every one of you. It's not something unique to me. It's the human ability to begin again, no matter how many times we've been broken. Applause rose, warm and steady. Some women wiped away tears. Afterward, as they gathered around to share their own stories, I felt the familiar mix of sorrow and hope that defined this work. Healing happens in connection, not isolation. We recover ourselves by helping others recover too. That evening, Eric and I hosted dinner at our apartment. My mother brought her famous apple pie. Catherine from work came with her husband. Professor Levine drove up from Boston. Surrounded by this chosen family, I marveled at how far we had come. A toast, Eric said, raising his glass. To Louise, whose courage inspires us all. I shook my head, lifting mine. To all of us. Choosing love over fear, connection over isolation, hope over despair. As laughter filled the home that had once been a place of violence, I felt the truth of what I had told the women earlier: trauma changes you forever. There is no going back. But from the pieces, you can build something new and meaningful. What happened that night 7 years ago will always be part of my story. But it is no longer the defining chapter. It is just one part of a larger narrative, one about resilience, compassion, and the power of breaking silence.